Amigos, bem-vindos ao 60 e Blau Urgente. Nesta terça-feira, 20 de fevereiro, é o dia X, o dia D para Julian Assange. O editor do site Wikileaks pode ser extraditado para os Estados Unidos. Se isso acontecer, Julian será julgado num tribunal que pode condená-lo a 175 anos de prisão. Na prática, uma prisão perpétua. O crime de Julian Assange foi publicar documentos que revelam os crimes de guerra cometidos pelos Estados Unidos. Eles querem condenar Assange com base numa lei da Primeira Guerra Mundial. Agora você vai saber como a CIA decidiu perseguir e prender Julian Assange. Vai ouvir do próprio Assange como funciona a mídia oligárquica e o papel que ela tem na manutenção do império. Vamos trazer também um depoimento de Stella Assange, a mulher de Julian, sobre como é visitar o marido na prisão de segurança máxima de Belmarsh, em Londres, onde ele está detido desde 2019.
Quite intimidating, a dog search.
Vamos começar contando rapidamente essa história. Quem é Julian Assange? O que é o Wikileaks? E por que os Estados Unidos primeiro aplaudiram e depois perseguiram Julian Assange? Julian Assange é australiano, se formou em arquitetura, mas logo enveredou para o jornalismo. Em 2006, fundou o Wikileaks, um site para publicar documentos verdadeiros vazados por fontes não oficiais, os chamados whistleblowers, ou denunciantes, gente de dentro do sistema, dentro de governos e grandes corporações, que teve acesso a documentos que comprovam operações criminosas ou que não vieram ao conhecimento público. Através do Wikileaks, Edward Snowden, que trabalhava na CIA, divulgou documentos sobre a atuação criminosa dos Estados Unidos nas guerras do Iraque e do Afeganistão. Assim, ficamos sabendo das torturas cometidas em Abu Ghraib, no Iraque. Outra denunciante, Chelsea Manning, também vazou documentos restritos através do Wikileaks. Por sua atuação em defesa da liberdade de expressão, Julian Assange ganhou dezenas de prêmios, inclusive o de Homem do Ano da revista Time. A onda contra Julian Assange mudou em 2010, quando o Wikileaks vazou um vídeo inédito revelando o assassinato de jornalistas na guerra do Iraque. Vamos ver o vídeo que conta a história desse vazamento, um passo decisivo na história do Wikileaks.
WikiLeaks changed the game. When it launched in 2006, it was like nothing the world had ever seen before. Anyone with any important information or proof of classified secrets could submit their data to WikiLeaks anonymously, something that was not very common back then. What made WikiLeaks different from other whistleblower organizations is that they could never really be charged with stealing information. They didn't do any of the hacking themselves, so to a certain extent, they were innocent, which led to one other major advantage WikiLeaks had. Since they weren't involved in stealing the information, the classified documents they published could be used in court. This was a game changer and terrifying for powerful people with dark secrets to hide. In April 2010, WikiLeaks releases this video. It's a simple, low-quality video from an Apache helicopter involved in a Baghdad airstrike on July 12, 2007. This video was an airstrike that killed 18 people, pretty standard stuff for the US military. What was strange, however, was that for a group of armed insurgents, they seemed to be walking around rather calmly, while a loud, heavily armed, unmistakably Western Apache helicopter was roaming above. But rest assured, the US military promised us that, quote, "There is no question that coalition forces were clearly engaged in combat operations against a hostile force.
Move along, there's nothing to see here."
These were not enemy insurgents hostile forces that the US military shot up, but two unarmed photographers for the news agency Reuters, Namir Noor Eldin and his driver Sahid Chama. The pilots mistook their cameras for weapons, and a myriad of other casualties that didn't have any weapons or seemed to be hostile at all. The US military just tried to cover up friendly fire on journalists, and almost instantly, the video was spread to every newspaper and online publication around the world.
Of course, our top story this morning, the White House blasting the release of over 90,000 U.S. military records on the war in Afghanistan.
A partir daí, Julian Assange se tornou persona non grata. Sua vida passou a ser um inferno, perseguido pela CIA, mas ele sabia o que estava fazendo e com quem estava lidando. Neste depoimento, em 2011, Assange identifica na mídia oligárquica o maior esteio de apoio ao sistema imperialista, aquele que promove e usa as guerras para a manutenção do poder a qualquer custo.
Things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment. But our number one enemy is ignorance. And I believe that is the number one enemy of everything, is not understanding what is actually going on in the world. It's only when you start to understand that you can make effective decisions and effective plans. Now, the question is, who is promoting ignorance? Well, those organisations that try to keep things secret, and those organisations which distort true information to make it false, misrepresentative. In this latter category, it is bad media. It really is my opinion that the media in general are so bad, we have to question whether the world wouldn't be better off without them altogether.
Em 2012, as ameaças contra Julian Assange se tornaram insuportáveis. Ele foi obrigado a se refugiar. Com o apoio do então presidente do Equador, Rafael Correa, ele se abrigou na Embaixada do Equador em Londres. A CIA e o governo inglês passam então a vigiá-lo 24 horas por dia, enquanto cuidam de tramar a sua prisão.
On August 16, 2012, the Foreign Minister of Ecuador announced that Julian Assange had been given asylum at the Ecuadorian embassy in London.
We trust that the United Kingdom will offer as soon as possible the guarantee for the safe passage for this asylum of Mr. Assange, and that they will respect those international agreements that they have signed in the past and that they have always respected.
A tiny office in the embassy was converted into a studio, with a bed, shower, treadmill, kitchenette, and computer. If he had guests, they'd visit him in his little studio. His lawyers, therapists, and even a personal trainer had to make do with the small space. If he ever stepped foot outside the embassy, British police officers were front and center, ready to arrest him on the spot for skipping bail. And he would stay trapped in that embassy for 5 years before WikiLeaks released their most damaging data dump yet, all at the cost of the US government's dignity. Julian Assange was a target for the US government under both President Obama and President Trump. He embarrassed the military, showed them how weak their security was, and on March 7, 2017, he released what they called Vault 7, arguably the most embarrassing data leak in the history of the CIA and the US government. What was in Vault 7? All the internal documentation regarding the CIA's ultra-secret hacking division and its tactics. The guys who were supposed to be the best hackers in the world had apparently been hacked. This breach was not just embarrassing, it took away years of agency pride and dignity. The organization tasked with keeping America's secrets couldn't even stop a leak of their most classified information. Vault 7 had it all. Details on electronic surveillance equipment, cyber warfare weapons, and how they could break into almost every cell phone operating system on the planet. All out in the open for the world to see. Agency officials used to, quote, laugh about WikiLeaks, end quote, mocking the State Department and the Pentagon for allowing so much material to escape their control. But now, it was their turn. And for the CIA, revenge wasn't even a question, it was the only answer. Their blood was boiling and all they could see was red. An example had to be made, and the main targets? Of course, it was Julian Assange.
A luta pela liberdade de Assange começou a ganhar corpo e espaço na mídia. Afinal, ele era um cara de sucesso que tinha abastecido com informações preciosas a mídia comercial em todo o mundo. Jornais como The New York Times, The Guardian, o Globo e a Folha no Brasil tinham publicado material saído direto do vazamento Vault 7. A TV Globo também tinha produzido matérias especiais com tudo que tinha saído do Wikileaks. Assange havia revelado, por exemplo, que a presidenta Dilma Rousseff tinha sido vigiada pela CIA dentro do Palácio do Planalto. O governo dos Estados Unidos foi obrigado a pedir desculpas formais ao Brasil. O que o diretor da CIA, Mike Pompeo, mais queria era um movimento político para prender Assange. E ele criou um. Pegou o sucessor de Rafael Correia e o obrigou a retirar o asilo concedido a Assange. Daí para a prisão foi um pulo.
WikiLeaks walks like a hostile intelligence service and talks like a hostile intelligence service.
This new classification was bureaucratic speak that now justified the use of offensive measures against this non-state hostile intelligence service. The fight was on, and according to Mike Pompeo, there were no rules. After his speech, he gave CIA officers the order to figure out the, quote, art of the possible, end quote. He said, quote, nothing's off limits. Don't self-censor yourself. I need operational ideas from you. I'll worry about the lawyers in Washington, end quote. On April 2nd, 2019, President Lenin Moreno announced Assange was no longer welcome at the embassy. Assange had very little time to prepare when 9 days later, the Ecuadorian government invited British police into the embassy to arrest Assange on the basis of skipping bail. That very same day, Assange was found guilty and sentenced 50 weeks in prison starting May 1st. The US's time had come. Assange had been secretly indicted over a year earlier in March 2018, and on the same day he was arrested in London, the indictment was unsealed. He was charged with conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. A month later, while serving his sentence in the Belmarsh prison, the US added 17 charges to the list. The maximum sentence? 170 years in prison. 170 years for the leader of an organization that wasn't all that different from other news agencies that published leaks. At his extradition hearing in May 2019, Assange said, quote, I do not wish to surrender myself for extradition for doing journalism that has won many, many awards and protected many people. End quote. Julian Assange is currently still in Belmarsh prison at the time of recording this video. If he's extradited, he faces solitary confinement in a supermax prison, 170 years in prison for someone who did the same job as most journalists out there. Where I wouldn't be surprised if he met the same fate as our friend whose first name starts with a J and last name starts with an E. Time will tell what the future holds for the whistleblower pioneer.
O homem que tem um nome que começa com J e o segundo nome que começa com a letra E é Jeffrey Epstein. Ele era um milionário que se envolveu no tráfico de menores, em coisas de tráfico sexual, e acabou morrendo na prisão. Ele se suicidou na prisão. É muito triste tudo isso. Mas a situação de Assange não envolve crime. Sim, ele foi detido pela CIA, ele foi acusado de ter cometido um crime de estupro também de uma mulher na Suécia, mas ficou provado que era uma armação e o caso foi encerrado. Assange sequer foi a julgamento. E adivinhem quem armou tudo isso? Pois é. A verdade é que, com a prisão, todo o trabalho de Julian Assange passou a ser questionado e condenado pela mídia corporativa. O Wikileaks passou a ser visto como um site criminoso. E o crime dele qual foi? Publicar documentos sigilosos que foram entregues ao Wikileaks por outras pessoas, documentos que comprovam os crimes de guerra dos Estados Unidos. Poucas vozes se levantaram na mídia para defender Assange. Uma delas veio do Alto Comissariado da ONU para os Direitos Humanos, um senhor chamado Christophe Perroux. Ele publicou recentemente um artigo em que ele diz: Julian Assange não deveria estar preso, ele deveria estar aqui, ao nosso lado, em nosso escritório, lutando por liberdade de imprensa e direitos humanos. Nos Estados Unidos, o ex-juiz Andrew Napolitano mandou um recado aos juízes britânicos: se vocês forem subservientes aos Estados Unidos, vão ser responsáveis pela morte de um inocente, disse o juiz. Vamos ouvir o depoimento dele.
Julian is an American hero and an international hero as well. Julian Assange is the most important journalist in the world at this moment in time because he had the courage and intellectual fortitude to expose the fatal and maniacal excesses of the American government and its foreign policy in the Middle East. As a journalist, he received American secrets from someone. That someone was prosecuted and convicted for stealing the secrets. But under American law, under the U.S. Constitution, as interpreted by the Supreme Court in a famous case known as the Pentagon Papers case, when a journalist receives something of material interest to the public, it doesn't matter how he receives it, he is free to publish it without civil or criminal liability. The person who stole it and gave it to Julian has since had their sentence commuted, wisely, I think, by former President Obama. But Julian Assange languishes in a hellhole in a London prison because the American government, under the presidency of Donald Trump, decided to indict him for espionage and expose him to 175 years in jail. This is a profound injustice. He should not be tried for anything. You all know that. But now I add a word to the British judges and justices who will hear his final appeal before the end of this month. I am a former life-tenured judge in the United States of America, and I can tell you, Your Honors, most respectfully, that Julian Assange cannot get a fair trial in the United States on these charges. The bias against him, the prejudice in favor of the government, the exaggerated charges against him, the way he's been portrayed in the media, will prevent him from getting a fair trial. If you allow the British government to be subservient to the American government and send this good and decent man to the United States, he will not only not get a fair trial, he'll never see the light of day. If you slavishly follow the written law of extradition and send Julian Assange here, you will kill him. A profoundly unjust result. Do the right thing, Your Honors. Be the heroes you can be, and set him free.
Nos últimos dias, a cidade de Roma concedeu a Julian Assange o título de cidadão romano. Um colecionador de arte francês disse que vai destruir 45 milhões de dólares em obras de arte, incluindo obras de Picasso, quadros de Rembrandt e outros pintores famosos, se no caso de Julian Assange, for acabar na prisão e Julian Assange morrer na prisão. Ele já colocou um ácido que vai destruir toda essa coleção. Depois de muito debate também, o Parlamento da Austrália votou uma moção exigindo dos Estados Unidos a retirada das acusações contra Julian Assange. O primeiro-ministro Alexander Albanese também soltou uma nota defendendo a libertação do cidadão Julian Assange. Para esse deputado, o caso já foi longe demais.
In what world is public interest journalism exposing crimes a crime itself? Clearly not in any sensible world. So perhaps it's unsurprising that by 2010, Vice President Biden had actually changed his mind. And he publicly conceded that Julian Assange had inflicted no substantive damage other than to be embarrassing for the US government. Biden had gone from high-tech terrorist to somebody who embarrasses the US government. That's where they are. So the successful extradition of Julian Assange would effectively criminalise investigative journalism as espionage. It would set a legal precedent allowing the prosecution of anyone who breaks the duty of silence on classified American information and state-sponsored crime. It would impose American censorship on British journalism. And for what? In Joe Biden's words, to avoid embarrassing the American government.
Para a família de Assange, o drama é permanente. Julian mal vê seus filhos menores. Um filme será lançado nos próximos dias na Inglaterra, contando a história da luta de Julian e Stella, sua mulher. O filme se chama Trust Fall. Em português, poderia ser traduzido de perda de confiança. Ao lado do pai de Julian, Stella vem liderando a luta mundial pela liberdade de Assange. Ela conta aqui como é a visita a Julian, que está há 5 anos detido na prisão de segurança máxima de Belmarsh.
Then you go through a metal detector arch. Then you go through the wand. They go from head to toe. You have to lift your feet. You take your shoes off, obviously. You can't carry anything in. Not a paper, not a tissue. The children have to go through that too. They do the wand from head to toe, front and back, under their feet. Then we go through a second body search. They pat you down. They look behind your ears. They look in your hair. You open your mouth. They look under your tongue. They pat you down, front and back. Under your feet. They put their hands under your feet, your bare feet. And then you go through another airlock. And then another airlock. And then there's a dog search. And the dog searches you, it jumps up on you, it smells you, goes back, you have to stay still, the children have to stay still. And it's quite intimidating, a dog search. And they have to do this just to see their father, once a week. Think about that. And why? What has Julian done? He published the truth about war crimes against a powerful government that is exerting its power to punish him. This cruelty is against Julian. It's also against us as a family, against my children, but also against all of you. And staying quiet is just being complicit in this atrocity.
No Brasil, infelizmente, a gente conta nos dedos os jornalistas que deram a cara a tapa para defender Julian Assange. Poucos se dão conta que a possível condenação de Assange é também a condenação do jornalismo investigativo. Qualquer jornalista que publique documentos ditos secretos poderá ser preso a partir de agora. É um precedente seríssimo para a liberdade de informação e de expressão. Num país em que vive uma democracia frágil, né, como a nossa, com imprensa e jornalismo que têm um papel de esteio da democracia, mas estão concentrados em pouquíssimas mãos, é um péssimo sinal. Temos uma imprensa que, em boa parte, se acovardou, comprou o discurso do governo dos Estados Unidos. Nos próximos dias, vários eventos vão acontecer ao redor do mundo, denunciando o pedido de extradição e exigindo a liberdade imediata de Julian Assange. Fique ligado no que vai acontecer no Brasil. Sábado, dia 17, e também na segunda-feira, dia 20, em Curitiba, haverá um evento. Segunda, dia 19, ato em Salvador e em São Paulo. No dia 20, o chamado dia X, quando começa o julgamento, teremos atos no Rio de Janeiro e em Porto Alegre. Compareça, divulgue, prestigie. Se você gostou, eu peço que você compartilhe esse vídeo. E não se esqueça de deixar o seu like e de se inscrever no canal. Aqui no 60 e Blau tem muito mais conteúdo do que você possa imaginar. É com pessoas como você, com espectadores participativos, que a gente faz um jornalismo progressista e independente. Obrigado e volte sempre. Liberdade para Assange. Free Assange now.